Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Aspects. Not the kind that's on your butt. Anyway, I'm stupid, okay? Shush. I'm a big dummy, all right? But I got a Shaco hat, and you guys don't, so how about that? How about my Shaco hat? And y'all ain't got a Shaco hat. So, what am I doing with my life? So today we're going to be talking about the aspect of shared misery. This is part of a new series. If you haven't seen it, I'm going to be going over all the aspects, and we're going to be talking about them. Now, the aspect of the shared misery scales between 30 to 50%, and it is something that you can put on most defensive equipment. I believe it's classified as a defensive aspect, and that's a good thing. The defensive aspects usually mean that you can place them on things like boots, armor, helmet, and that's about it. The aspect of the shared misery, though, is a really freaking good one, but it is based on Lucky Hit, and Lucky Hit is a little strange. If you're ever kind of wondering how you can calculate out how Lucky Hit works, well, basically it involves your actual ability that you're using in combination with other things. So, for instance, if you take a look at my Frostbolt says it has a Lucky Hit chance of 52%. So I have a 52% to activate the Lucky Hit ability, which means that 48% of the time it will fail to activate the Lucky Hit ability. When the Lucky Hit ability is activated, it then has a 50% chance, if I have a 50% here, to activate the effect to share the crowd control effect with an enemy. And this is when you hit a crowd controlled enemy. And before we go any further, what is a crowd control? Let's look at that real quick. So if you go down here into the damage versus crowd controlled monsters, you'll see that damage versus crowd controlled monsters lists crowd control as slow, immobilize, stun, knockback, knockdown, taunt, fear, tether, daze, chill, or freeze. So all of these are considered to be crowd control effects, which means that this can work on any monster who is under the effects of one of those crowd control effects. It says there is up to a 50% chance for that crowd control effect to spread to another unaffected enemy, which is really, really powerful. Now, why is this so powerful? Well, because if you have a crowd control effect running on a target, like a chill, a freeze, a stun, a daze, any of those various things, and you are utilizing this, you can force that crowd control effect to spread to the other targets. And let me see if I can actually show you how this would work. So let's go to multiple dummies. And let's go ahead and go to elite dummies. And let's start attacking the one in the center. As you can see here, I'm hitting the one in the center, and all of a sudden now this guy over here is frozen. This guy is frozen. This guy is frozen. It's spreading the crowd control effect to multiple targets, and it almost acts as a chain. So in this particular character, in this particular sorceress, I have an ability called Ice Shards Enchantment, which is Ice Shards automatically conjure and fly toward a frozen enemy. Which means that if I can freeze one enemy, there's a very good chance that that enemy will cause that to spread to the others. And causing it to spread to the others will in turn also create more Ice Shards. The more Ice Shards that come out, the more enemies that end up frozen, because Ice Shards also has the ability to freeze enemies. So you end up in this very interesting chain of effects where the freezing and chilling effects are being spread throughout the community of monsters, almost like a plague. Like literally one person is infected with the plague, and then it spreads to another person that is infected with the plague. Now, there are a lot of different ways that you can potentially utilize an effect like this. You can utilize this effect, number one, just by simply spreading like freezes. You can use it in tandem with certain items, like, for instance, Frostburn Gauntlets. Frostburn Gauntlets give you the ability to spread freezes as well. So in this particular case, with the Frostburns, I have a 25% lucky hit chance to just simply freeze an enemy, right? So even if I'm not using a cold effect, I could still just simply spam a target like this and potentially freeze an enemy, which, using the lucky hit chance to spread that freeze to other enemies, you can see that I'm able to freeze literally an entire field of monsters. This is really, really powerful for certain builds because the more freezing effects you have, the more damage you can potentially output. the more stuns you have, the more damage you can output. And let's talk about that for a second. So, cold damage is based on a crowd control effect, which is chills and freezes. Lightning is generally based upon the effects of stun. Convulsions is one of the ways that you can have stuns coming from lightning effects. Fire tends to be immobilization. Mobilization is one of the things that you get from fire. All of these can be spread through this method, and damage against if they are immobilized. Where's the one that actually immobilizes them? Here it is. Your pyromancy skills have up to a 5% chance to immobilize enemies for 2 seconds. This chance is doubled while you are healthy. So as you can see, you have a crowd control effect for fire. It's immobilization. You have a crowd control effect with lightning. It's stuns. You have crowd control effects with ice. It is literally chill and freezes. And in general, when it comes to the aspect of shared misery, which works on all characters, by the way, it is very, very effective to spread those crowd control effects to as many monsters as you possibly can at any given time. I have utilized the aspect of shared misery successfully on a large number of characters to spread those crowd control effects. This is just one of these characters. This is my freeze everything sorceress, and she's absolutely amazing at, as you can see, literally freezing an entire field of battle. I also have another character which utilizes this item. It's my rogue, which is based upon the Frostburn gauntlets, and I utilize the aspect of shared misery to share the freeze effect from the Frostburn gauntlets to other monsters. And this is a lucky hit build. Lucky hit builds are based around that whole lucky hit thing anyway, so having an ability that's lucky hit isn't really that big of a deal at all anyway. And I can show you how her freezing effects share as well. But in general, the aspect of shared misery is an absolutely amazing aspect. The fact that it's capable of being put on boots means that it is absolutely insane for a lot of builds, because the boot aspect, and I hate to say this, but the boot aspect slot is one of the least effective aspect slots. There's really not a whole lot of really amazing aspects in that place, and of the ones that are actually really good, aspect of shared misery is definitely one of the ones that's really amazing. So this is the rogue, and she also uses the aspect of shared misery, but I believe hers is actually on her armor, which is still a pretty good one. And basically how she works is she builds up her combo points. Yeah, let's go ahead and grab multiple. And she utilizes the Frostburn gauntlets. Well, I build up my combo points, and with the Tobolts I've got 22. I line myself up nice so I can get multiple shots. And as you can see, I have now frozen the entire field of battle. Just in one shot. Very, very effective the way this character works. Frosties allow me to share that freeze effect with multiple targets. Well, freeze a target instantaneously, and the aspect of shared misery allows me to cause that freeze to spread very quickly throughout the community like a plague, essentially. And this works for basically any crowd control effect. As I was saying earlier, whether you're doing stuns, mobilizes, taunts, fears, whatever it may be, if you're looking to spread the frickin' misery around to the monsters so you can get better damage, well, you know, this is the way you do it. There's also other reasons why you might want to share your crowd control effects besides just simply sharing the crowd control effects itself. Perhaps you're utilizing one of the aspects that actually takes advantage of that aspect. So on the sorceress specifically, there is an aspect, I believe it's called the conceited. I could be wrong. Let me pull her up real quick just so I can double check. But basically, it gives you an additional damage bonus. There's the control aspect, I know that one, that if the monster is frozen, if the monster is stunned, if the monster is immobilized, you get an additional bonus. This works surprisingly well for the aspect of shared misery, because what this does is this gives you a rather large damage bump if the monster is immobilized, stunned, or frozen. And the aspect of the shared misery makes sure that the monsters are stunned, immobilized, or frozen. So you can definitely utilize the shared misery aspect to ensure that you are getting damage bonuses, like, for instance, the Necklace of Control. On top of this, there's also other specific things that you could potentially be getting from sharing a specific crowd control effect. And to show you that, I kind of have to go over to the Druid, because he's one of the ones that has the most in this particular regard. So the Druid has some crazy stuff that involves if the monster is immobilized. There's a lot of, like, if the monster is immobilized, gain X. And I can show you some of these. So, like, for instance, right here, it says dealing lightning damage to enemies has up to an 8% chance to immobilize them. If the target is already immobilized, the lightning damage dealt to them is increased. So here we have a damage bump if the monster is already immobilized. We also have another one, which is 10% chance to dealing damage to a vulnerable, immobilized, or stunned enemy, that a lightning bolt also hits them. So if the monster is vulnerable, immobilized, or stunned, and you hit them with the lucky hit chance that you have here, there's a very good chance that you're going to get an additional lightning bolt coming out as well. And then on top of that, we also have storm skills that cast grant 1 spirit and deal 15 times increased damage when damaging a vulnerable, immobilized, or slowed enemy. So as you can see, there's tons of different ways where if the monster is immobilized, if the monster is stunned, if the monster is this, if the monster is that, you gain these bonuses. Well, Aspect of Shared Misery just makes it very easy for you to share any kind of crowd control effect with a large group of monsters and obtain all of those bonuses, well, basically across the entire group of monsters. Now, what are the downsides of Aspect of Shared Misery? Well, the Aspect of Shared Misery doesn't work on bosses, obviously, because bosses, of course, are not, number one, usually in groups, so who are you going to share it with? Number two, they are also immune to crowd control effects. Instead of crowd controlling a boss, what happens is you actually activate the stagger bar. If you'd like to learn more about how stagger works in Diablo 4, I actually have a really good video where we spent some time going over stagger and talking about all of the various effects of how stagger works. This is actually my video right here on, how does stagger work. And we spent a good 35 minutes. Actually, we spent a lot longer than that, by the way, going over the effects of stagger and how they apply. Now, crowd control effects do apply to bosses. They just don't actually apply the crowd control effect, and instead apply a percentage to the stagger bar, which actually does go up and down depending on how many times the boss has been staggered, what kind of effect you are using, and so forth and so on. The main problem is, though, however, is that when it comes to the Aspect of Shared Misery, it doesn't really help versus bosses at all, because, like I said, number one, there's no one to share it with, and number two, you really just don't get any benefit by having that aspect equipped when you're fighting a single monster, because obviously, even if it does activate, you can't share it with anybody around you, and there's no one who will share a crowd control effect to the boss, vice versa. So you're better off when it comes to bossing in terms of the Aspect of Shared Misery with something else. However, I personally really like the Aspect of Shared Misery, and I think it works very, very well for dungeon farming. If you are utilizing, just a crappy aspect on your boots and you don't actually have anything really good there, the Aspect of the Shared Misery is a very good one for a boot slot. And speaking of slots, if you actually want to know which slots Aspect of Shared Misery is good for, one of the easiest ways to do this is just simply to pull it up in the bar. So let me just type in a shared. I like having the ability to search my thing here. And we're going to take that out. We're going to take it over to the vendor. And you just basically, you don't even have to extract it. All you have to do is you just put it in the window, like this. And you hover your mouse over it, and it will tell you that it's capable of being put in helm, chest armor, boots, gloves, amulets, and shield. And also it tells you that if you put it in the amulet, it will be increased by 50%. You can also test to see what that 50% is by simply putting it in the bar with an amulet. So for instance, in my case, if I threw my amulet in here, and let me show you this. You do have to extract it for this one. So if I put my amulet on here, and I can look at the preview window to see what I would get. So this would be a 75% chance to lucky hit the spreading of the effect. I don't necessarily think this is a good one to put in the amulet slot, but it's up to you. Now, how do you get your hands on one? So, Proner and I over at Diablo4.life have come up with a pretty handy tool to be able to figure out which aspect you want to gamble for and what the best slot is. So, if you type in Shared Misery into the gambling tool, and I'll have the gambling tool linked in the video, by the way, it will tell you down here what the optimal is. So, the most optimal slot is Boots on the Druid, and the reason why it's Boots on the Druid is because the Druid has the least number of competing gamble slots. You can still get it, on Boots on the Sorcerer, and Boots on the Sorcerer, Boots on the Necromancer, Boots on the Rogue, etc. But because the Rogue has the least number of competing, the Druid has the least number of competing aspects in the Boot slot, the Boots on the Druid is actually the best place to try and gamble them if you're trying to get your hands on them. However, you can still get a pretty good chance with the Barbarian, the Rogue, the Sorcerer, and it looks like the Necromancer has the worst chance, and this is because he has a lot of competing boot aspects, boot-specific aspects. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we're just talking about the aspect of the shared misery, and as always, keep watching.